All right, guys, so today we are going to finish up World War II. So, um, yesterday you were supposed to work on a PowerPoint about the Tuskegee Airmen, which was the first group of African American pilots from the U.S. Um, at the start of the war, blacks were not allowed to serve in combat positions, but eventually they did change this because you had a lot of African Americans who also wanted to fight for their country and help out. So they were allowed to train as pilots, and these were the first group of black pilots to participate in the war. They were they're very good at what they did. They received lots and lots and lots of awards. There is actually a movie about them called Red Tails that you can watch. So they were very, very good. And we have some pictures of them right here. Now, people were very skeptical of them at first when they started. So a lot of people said, well, black people can't fight as good as white people, or they might not be able to pilot planes as good. However, they quickly proved them wrong. Now, as the U.S. joined the war, they had to support their soldiers overseas. Now, one of the ways they would do this was by creating more jobs and building more weapons and supplies the soldiers would need. So this is what actually brought America out of the Great Depression, because all these new jobs are created for men and women. People enter the workforce to make these supplies that the soldiers need. Americans also help pay for the war by buying war bonds. And a war bond is when you buy, it's like a little ticket, and it says, congratulations, you bought a war bond. And that money that you use to pay for it will go towards the war effort. So the government will use that to pay for things the Army needs. Well, when the war is over, you take your war bond back to the government, your little ticket, and they will pay you back that money that you spent on it along with interest. So it's like you're making money by doing this. And they would try to scare people into buying war bonds by saying, if you don't buy war bonds, this is what could happen. And this is a scary Japanese soldier and he's going to attack your wife. So they would have all these propaganda posters up encouraging you to do this, because if not, these bad things will happen. The government also rationed goods. So every year, if every member of your family would get a ration book that looks like this, and it has stamps on the inside. And whenever you wanted to go to the grocery store and buy something, you would have to show them your stamps and they would take it out of your book. So let's say you wanted to go buy sugar. You might only be able to buy so much sugar a week, and you had to show them your ration book in order to get it. Now, like today, with the coronavirus, people were going to the grocery store and they were hoarding toilet paper. That was not allowed back then. You could only get maybe one pack with your ration book. You could not get any more until the next week. Families also grew victory gardens, which is basically just like a little private garden for you, but they were called victory gardens to make it sound cooler and like you're really supporting the war. So while this is going on the home front, so back at home in the U.S., they're also preparing to start going on the offensive, to start attacking the Germans. And this kind of comes to a head on D-Day, which was June 6, 1944. Now, the Nazis had previously pushed out the British army from France. They had taken over France completely. So D-Day is the Allies' chance to get back into France, to take it over from the Nazis, to get it back. Now, the plan was to attack the northern part of France right here. So all this is called Normandy. You have U.S. troops attacking, you have British troops, and you also have Canadian troops attacking. And they're each attacking at different points. So the official name for D-Day was called Operation Overlord. And the goal was to get troops on the ground to liberate France. So to start pushing the Germans out of France. Now, there were two parts of this plan. The first part was that the night before, paratroopers, which are soldiers who fly in planes and then they jump out of planes with their parachutes, they were going to drop down behind German lines the night before to seize critical roads and bridges for the push inland. So they were going to drop behind the Germans. Then the next morning, the Allied troops would invade the beaches of Normandy, France. There were 5 different beaches. You had Omaha, Utah, Gold, Sword, and Juno. And once the Allied troops got on the beaches, it would almost be like the Germans were surrounded because the paratroopers were behind them and the rest of the troops were in front of them. So the goal was to surround the German troops. Now, here are your paratroopers. So they were in these small planes. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned the night before. They ended up getting shot at. You had some planes that got shot down. A lot of the men had to jump out earlier than they planned, and so when they jumped out, they got lost and they weren't where they were supposed to be. So they had to try and figure out where they were supposed to go behind enemy lines. It was really difficult. Now, the U.S. troops were supposed to attack 2 beaches, Utah and Omaha. So we said there are 5 beaches in Normandy. The U.S. was supposed to attack these 2. Now, this right here in the orange is where the paratroopers dropped the night before. So St. Mary Glees and Carrington. Now, the invasion, so the day of June 6th, 5,300 ships and 11,000 planes crossed the English Channel, which is the little strip of water between England and France, and they landed on the beaches of Normandy. And more than 150,000 Allied troops crossed the English Channel. The reason there were so many is because the Allies knew this was going to be a very costly battle and that a lot of people would die. So they had to take ships over to Normandy, and this is a picture of Normandy when they got there. This is the beach, and the ships that they're in have no cover. These soldiers are basically sitting ducks. So the ships are supposed to get the soldiers close to the beach, not on the beach, but close to the beach, drop the soldiers off. Then they have to walk across the beach without getting shot, which is very difficult. So these are what the inside of the ships look like. This is almost like a little drawbridge, but it's for the ship. It would open up, let the soldiers out, and they'd have to wade in the water all the way to the beach. Now, once this door opened, they are constantly being shot at by the Germans who are on the beach. And occasionally, because they're being shot at, they would have to throw themselves over the side of the boat. And some of them drowned while doing that because the supplies they had on were so heavy, it pulled them down and they couldn't get back up. So this is the beach of Normandy. Now, most of Normandy's beaches have cliffs like this. And the German soldiers are on top of these cliffs. They've got bunkers on top. So they are shooting down at the soldiers. There is nowhere for the soldiers to hide on the beach. Once they get off the ship, there is nothing protecting them. They just have to hope they don't get shot. And it was pure luck who got shot and who didn't. So we have another picture of soldiers getting off the ships and running onto the beach. You have some wounded soldiers. Some more wounded soldiers in there on stretchers. And this is a medic, so he has a cross on his arm to show that he's a medic. And the general rule was you don't shoot at medics on either side. So even if it's your enemy, you don't shoot at medics. Now, this is what it looked like when you got up close. So you have the cliff right here. These are bunkers that the German soldiers were also in to protect them even further. And some of the beaches had these big metal things on them. And this was to stop boats from pulling up onto the shore. So they had to let the soldiers off in the water. And this is a diagram. So it shows the boats coming in. They're letting the soldiers off. They have to cross this beach, get right up here, and hope they don't get shot by all the Germans up here. So like I said, it was pure luck who got shot and who didn't. It was very difficult, and the Allies knew that there were going to be a lot of casualties, a lot of people dying during this. Because of that, they tried to make it better for them. The morning of the attack, they fed them this very, very large, hearty breakfast. But on the way over on these ships, the water was so rough and the men were so nervous, a lot of them threw up the breakfast. So it just ended up making it worse. It made their stomachs upset. It was a nice thought, but it didn't work out. Now, we won D-Day, obviously. So we won D-Day. We started pushing the Germans back. We took over France, and by the winter of 1944, Hitler has his last offensive attack, or his last major offensive attack, and this is called the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge was the winter of 1944, and U.S. soldiers are literally like hunkered down in the snow. They've dug these foxholes in the ground. They don't have gloves. They don't have warm hats. They don't have warm jackets. They're running out of food and supplies. Their shoes have holes in them. A lot of them are getting frostbite. Really bad conditions. And they can see the German army from across from them. So like this might be at the edge of the woods where this guy is right here. They can see the German army across from them. They're not that far. And the German army is constantly firing at them and constantly firing at them. And the 101st Airborne, which was the group of men that were there, they were told, we have you surrounded. You should surrender. Well, the general of that group, he responded back with one word. He said, nuts. Like, that is nuts. I'm not surrendering. Are you kidding me? That's crazy. Which is a good thing they didn't, because they ended up getting back up and they were able to win this battle and further push the Germans back. So the Allies take over France. They start taking over parts of Germany, and Germany is forced to retreat. And then the Soviets are also pushing the Germans back on this side too. So the Germans are losing a lot of land. And finally, in 1945, Hitler ends up killing himself because he sees no way out. He knows he's going to lose. And then not too long later, Germany surrenders to the Allies on May 8, 1945. And this becomes known as VE Day, or Victory in Europe Day. The problem is, while the war in Europe is over, the war in Japan is still going on. And so the U.S. has to think about, well, what are we going to do about that? So the war in the Pacific. The Japanese had been going from island to island and taking over the resources on those islands. So the U.S. starts their island hopping campaign, which is when they also jump from island to island and take these back over from the Japanese. They're literally hopping from island to island, taking back land the Japanese stole. Now, Japanese soldiers were very intense. They were trained not to give up and to fight to the death. So if they got captured as a prisoner of war, that was seen as disgraceful. It was upsetting to their family. They viewed it as, they should have died. And they had kamikaze pilots, and their job was to purposefully crash their planes into ships and into important buildings, knowing that they're going to die. But it is seen as a great honor to be a kamikaze pilot. Now, unfortunately, in 1945, President Franklin D. Roosevelt dies, and his vice president, Harry Truman, becomes president. And Harry Truman has to decide what he's going to do about the war in Japan. Is he going to bring all the soldiers from Europe over to Japan and have a land invasion like they did with D-Day, even though that was very costly, like a ton of men died? Or is he going to attack Japan with nuclear bombs? So he decides nuclear weapons are going to be the best bet. They're going to have the least amount of casualties. So in August 1945, the U.S. drops 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So this right here is actually the cloud from after the bomb dropped. The people flying the plane took this picture. And this is the aftermath of the bomb dropping. So it destroyed those cities. Many, many people died. But Harry Truman thought more people would die if there was a land invasion of Japan. And shortly after the atomic bombs were dropped, Japan surrenders on September 2nd, 1945, and this becomes known as Victory in Japan Day, and the war is officially over. So the Allies have won the war in Europe, and they've won the war in Japan. All right, we will stop here, and next week we will start talking about the Holocaust.